Recording. All right, select out the Trello board, and we will get started. I just asked the front desk to put on the air. Stuffy.
But not too much. Yeah.
It's one of those things. You get the air, and then we have to turn it off because it gets too cold.
I know this heat is always freezing, except for right now.
Yeah, it's a little stuffy. I don't like it stuffy. So, all right. So we had left off last week with Flexbox, right? Yes. We did Flexbox, and we tried to apply layout. We tried to apply Flexbox to layouts, and so building these different layouts required. This one just has some different naming conventions, but applying the or building it out. So think of this: you're going to be doing your final project, right? And your final project is going to be the accumulation of kind of what you learned in class, what you want to build. That's kind of up to you. I do have some previous final projects. You can always take a look here to see ideas for previous final projects. I'm just trying to find maybe a couple of interesting ones here. This one's an interesting one. Counts the projects in their portfolio. That's really it. Not a lot, but once again, structure. There's some design here. There's some structure. They have a nav. They have some animation, right? So some of the stuff they learned on their own, some of the stuff we taught in class. Not everything that you're going to see in there is stuff we taught. People went on and discovered different things. Okay, I'm just looking for one other one that I knew is Jacqueline. Jacqueline did a good job. This one is about edible plants and foraging the city for edible plants, and the structure here, right? The design is using Flexbox. Like this is using Flexbox. So designing these elements across a page like this, that's all Flexbox. I think down here, she started out to use grid, which is what you'll learn today. So what you're going to see is Flexbox and grid are going to be used on the same page, depending on what you're trying to lay out. Okay? You would have to just examine the page. If you examine the page, you'd see these are grid elements. Oh, Facebook close. Let me turn my notifications off. No. Right. Right. So we shouldn't get that. So take a look and get some ideas. If you haven't already thought about ideas, always feel free to run a site past me, shoot me a link. I have an idea, I'd like to do this, this is my idea. Use office hours to meet with me to run the idea past. Reach out during the day too, sometimes if I have time. Some people reach out during the day, I'm like, yeah, I got a moment, let's Zoom right now. If I have a moment and I feel like I can solve it really quickly, I could Zoom right now. So take a look. But the idea is, in the end, this, right? You're gonna have an idea, you're going to have content, and that content needs to be then structured into some sort of layout. Whatever the layout is that you decide, you need a layout. Okay, so this particular layout, right, is different than these other layouts that we're building, right? These are kind of basic layouts, but these layouts are meant to show you how to take elements and put them on a page and how to wrap other elements around them for the sake of flexboxing them, for the sake of positioning them, and depending on what you want to apply it on which elements. If it's grid versus flexbox, flexbox is going to require that if you have elements, kind of like that second layout, right? Here's our second layout. A lot of you would have done something like this, just from what I saw. And we had done it in class too. the second layout, right? What you would have done also is put this content inside of something, right? And this thing here you don't see on the page as an element, but you see the effects that this element has on these elements, right? So on this one, I would have turned on display flex, right? I would have turned flex on the parent element of this container, whatever it is. Is it a main? Could have been a main. Could be a section. Could be a div you call container. Whatever it is that you wanted to call it, we were doing containers and semantic elements. And then these elements here, you could have done something like, I don't know, this could have had a flex of maybe 3, this could have had a flex of 1, this could have had a flex of 1, and then you can control the elements inside them. And so flex gives you this flexibility. Grid, on the other hand, is a grid pattern. When we get to grid, you'll see that things will change a little bit, that in the world of grid, we're actually going to have columns and rows that we can put things in. And I'm going to give the columns and rows specific widths and heights, or elements are going to span a certain row, right? That's going to be a row, that'll probably be a row, that'll probably be a row, and then we'll have columns. And that'll be a column, that'll be a column, that'll be a column. And so it requires a different approach to the layouts, because when you use grid, you don't need Flexbox for these things. Like, I can force these elements to be in this kind of grid layout. Like, this could be a row here. Once again, these will be like the rows. And I could force them into that. So what you decide to do in the end versus Flexbox or grid, and what part of it I want to be Flexbox and what part I want to be grid, is going to dictate how you implement and structure the layout. So just consider that. And the sooner you start thinking through your layout, how you want your layout to look, the sooner you can start making these decisions here. Okay? And it's a lot easier to do the planning ahead of time than go back and then refactor something and be like, oh, I wanted to add this thing and now everything's all messed up and I got to reflex this and change that. It's a real tedious process. So really start thinking about what you want to do. And we're up to like week 4, right? This is week 4, all right? Week 5, and then we're just going to start jumping into JavaScript, and then you're going to start implementing stuff. So I'm going to expect by week 6, you start delivering wireframes and responsive and a layout. And then I'll expect that you'll apply JavaScript at some point in time, or make an API call to pull data, whatever it is. Whatever we get to, when we get to it, you might decide to use that then. Okay? So Flexbox has its purpose, right? And I did, in the homework, I gave an article on Flexbox, right? Was it Grid versus Flexbox here, right? And so it went through some of the differences between Grid and Flexbox. I mean, in a nutshell, did you get anything out of it in regards to when you would use Flexbox and when you would use Grid, or this was just them implementing 2 solutions, right? I mean, they do implement it and then they kind of go through some of the solutions. I think towards the end, I might talk about some of the differences, right? Conclusion, right? So if you made it through the whole article, blah, 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 truth is there isn't a better system. So you might be like, oh my God, you taught Flex, and Flex was so hard, and Grid's so easy, well, why don't we just do Grid? I'm like, because you gotta know both, right? And you're gonna see both apply. People go out of their way to master this. Grid is a newer thing, so people aren't really as many people using it as this has been out, right? And people were using display inline block, right? And inline elements before Flex, and you're gonna see all that out there too, right? So they'll tell you things like, you know, grids are great for building the big picture, which are the layouts, right? The layouts that don't have content, which are pretty much the layouts that we're building, right? They make it easy to manage the layouts. They can even handle more unorthodox asymmetrical designs. Flexbox is kind of like things sit next to each other, they go to the next row. It's more of an organized symmetrical pattern. Grid allows you to put things in different places, which is kind of cool. Flexbox is great to align the content inside the elements. What I want to stress with Flexbox, Flexbox is about, if I'm going to say when to use something, Flexbox is about content. If I want to align content, kind of like my header. So when I have a header with my logo and some links here, link, right? I would use Flexbox in this and then apply the parent elements possibly to grid. Like I would turn Flexbox so I could manage these and put space between, justify center, align, justify content, align them, align items, so I could center them really easily, and then take this box and stick it in a row. So the two go hand in hand. But this is the content that I'm managing, and this is the layout that I'm managing, right? And so that's why they say grids are good for building the big picture, the layouts, okay? And grid is for 2D layouts, rows and columns versus grid. It's either you have flex direction row or flex direction column, but you can't use them both at the same time. It's an either or, but with grid, you'll see that we'll do rows and columns, okay? So, and what's this last one here? There is no reason to use only CS Grid or Flexbox. Learn them both, okay? We're gonna do more practice with Flexbox today also, because I feel like people were struggling with Flexbox. Cool. So we'll do a review of Flexbox, because once again, it's important. We'll build out in nav. We built out the navs the other day using like nav anchors, and then there was the UL, LI approach. We'll just use Flexbox this time. Then I'll introduce grid, start working with grid, and then we'll apply the grid to the layouts, okay? Some of the things that I'm hoping maybe we'll get to is, let's see if I have it open. I was working on something earlier. I'm gonna close this, staging. So just earlier today, this is an example of using grid. This is all built in grid, and with Flexbox, you really struggle to get this done in Flexbox. And we're gonna build this out. This is actually something I wanna build out with you to give you the idea of like an image gallery, right? Because images are super important. Everybody's gonna want images in their project in one way, shape, or form. But the structure of this is where every element is just a single element, and I have one single parent. And because of that, I use grid, because grid allows me to put anything, any place within my grid. This was Flexbox. I couldn't use this structure for Flexbox and achieve this. I just couldn't do it. I'd have to change this up and add other parent containers and move things around. I just couldn't achieve it, okay? It's something I want us to do. So, let's go back. So, let's start with the homework. What I wanted to do with the homework is this. I saw a lot of the submissions. When it does come to the homework requires, at least to get the certificate of completion, 80% homework completion. So if you're missing a few homeworks, get those homeworks in. You want to get them submitted, because if you're less than 80%, you wouldn't get a certificate of completion, and some of you require the certificate for your job. So if you want it, I'd gladly give it to you, but you got to give me the 80% and the final project. And that's really it. I mean, the attendance is also, I think 3 classes is all you can miss. So I'll work with you on everything, but the homework kind of guarantees me you're prepared for the final project, right? Cool. So what I wanted to do with this for the homework review, I want us to just kind of pair up with a neighbor. So you're just going to pick a neighbor, pick somebody next to you, around you. If it works with 3 people, then do 3 people. I'm not starting until you know who your neighbor is. Yeah. Some of it is pretty self-evident. Who's going to be what? Find your neighbor. Find somebody to talk to. You may want to work with these 2, Darren and Michelle. Green team back there. You guys. Okay. what I want you to do is this. We did layout 1, right? That's the layout we did in class. And when we did layout 1, I applied putting a container around the section to apply Flexbox. So I gave you the initial starting point that sometimes these layouts require these things that you can't see. So we did have a container that had a big section and then some aside, right? And so I expected you would apply that concept to the other layouts, right? Seeing these things and applying them. So, okay, put somebody second. So I want you to compare your implementations of layout 2 and just discuss any differences or similarities in your approach. Look at the design. Did you structure it identically? I don't care if the classes are different or use a section or an article or a main, that doesn't matter. Are the containers kind of the same structure, right? Discuss any issues that you faced implementing the layouts, like did you struggle with anything? And I have a spreadsheet here that I want you to post at least one question. Oh, you can't access the spreadsheet? All right, let me edit, copy the, oh, this is General Assembly. So I gotta allow everyone, anyone, right? Anyone with this link, bloop. Anyone with the link can edit. Where is it? Anyone with the link can view. No, we want to edit. Anyone with General Assembly can view, edit. Right? Bloop. All right. Cool. All right. Does that change it, or I have to repost the link?
It changed it.
It did change it? Okay.
Yeah, if you refresh it, change it.
All right. So yeah, if you refresh, it should work. If not, I'll post it in the Slack channel also, and I'll put it up there. Okay. So just post one question. So I'm just making sure it works. Find your name. There's no reason why you should override anybody else's. Work through it. Talk. If there's 3, then give everyone just a chance to do it, and then post your question. I only want to spend maybe like 10 minutes to talking. We'll kind of review. I'll see some questions, and we can address those questions. Okay. I'm going to set the timer. Let's set this for about 10 minutes. Okay? Talk away, discuss your ideas, discuss everything. So are you working? Okay, cool.
Whatever it is that we did, right? You're not talking about one specific part of it.
I was talking to 2 later. Okay, some people may have the third one, so we still have something to target.
Yeah, so I have the name right here. That's all in the container.
It's the same, it just, because I just, Rachel,
No, I only did names. I have that exactly. Yeah, that's literally the only reason. Otherwise, I have exactly that. See, that was another part of it. It was like the nickname of the so like that's this whole thing as a section. So I get what I'm understanding is that like the main isn't necessarily the main container, it is whatever is the main point of that area. So I guess like I can also say this like break down some all that stuff. One thing like I think it can be kind of hard to like especially when you have like Like it's not yeah, this was Sunday, so
All right, we've got about 30 seconds left, so if you haven't posted a question, post a question. I was hoping they would be more CSS, they would be more Flexbox related, but you know, feel free to ask whatever it is. I'm going to target the Flexbox-based questions, because that's kind of what I wanted to get at. But the fact that I have these questions will allow me to look later and be like, oh, this thing when we discussed it on this day. Right? Okay. Bloop, 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 bloop. Done. All right. So got a handful of questions, and was the general consensus though, like from the groups, were the layouts similar, very, very similar, right? So you're not going to see some crazy designs because there's only a handful of ways of doing this. And even though you don't know all of them, the way that I showed you is more like putting boxes around things. Because there are ways to push this and have these things kind of wrap around and go to the next line. There's different ways to do it. Like, I can't teach you every way. I'm going to teach you like the way that makes sense to me and to structure things to be where they should be versus forcing things to move to the next line. It's a whole different ballgame when it comes to Flex with what you can do. So some of the structure that I had here, this is just, once again, the second one. So this is the solution. Once again, one solution for the 2-column layout, right? Once again, we kind of start, we emulate a container. So this container, I'm just doing it as though that would be the whole thing, right? That would be a container on the page. We just kind of put it inside this layout, this segment, everything. So that's just a layout design, right? We have our header and our footer by themselves, and then we have a section that has an aside, main, and an aside. And you could flip this. We could put main here. This could have been a section. I probably would have done that. I probably wouldn't have left it like this. It just was a submission, and I didn't get around to editing it. But if I had to do this, I would probably put that as a main and do this as a section, right? That makes more sense?
Yeah.
Okay, is that your question, Darren?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would do that. If I do that now, though, it's going to edit it. But just know, like, how people approach this is how they see the content. And they're like, well, this is just a section, and the section has stuff. But this is the real main content, so that's what I'm going to put as the main. There's no right or wrong, right? There is no right or wrong. Read the article. It'll tell you that there's no right or wrong. So I can't impose what it to be. So with the person that saw this, said this is section, and then this is main. But in essence, what we're seeing here is this: a section with a left, this section in the middle, and then the one on the right. And what we would have done is turn flex where? Where would we have turned flex box on here? Look at the structure. I'm going to collapse this section. Does the section go collapse? Where would you add it here for this layout? What looks like the most appropriate place to do it? You could do it to two places, the container, and you could do it to the section. Either one. You could have done it to both. So let's just take a look and see for layout 2 where they would have done this. So if I go to layout 2, right, we know we had section, and that section was this, right? And that section contained these, right? These elements. So if I go here, I see section here. Looks like it has a display of flex, right? So we turned on flex, at least for that section. This thing here, this really should be main, we call it main. And then for the container, if I go up to the container also was given flex. But why did we do flex direction column? What happens when you turn flex on? Yeah, everything just goes next to each other like they're inline elements, right? Elements that sit next to each other. So just know when you turn on flex, things sit next to each other. When we get to grid, grid also is a display property. When you turn on grid, nothing happens. Like grid is you have to tell me where each element belongs. I don't move anything anywhere until you tell me where things belong. With grid, the minute you turn the thing on, things start moving, things start going around. So we did it so that we could stack them up again. Okay, and the container just has a height, and we aligned items here just to kind of stretch them. This was also another property. So sometimes, let's see if I remove it, it looks like we don't even need that at this point. So some of these properties here that are tweaked on at the time you design them, because they worked here and then you added something else, and then you go back and you're like, why was that added in the first place? This may not even be needed anymore because whenever it was applied, it was probably applied to fix something, but we could remove that, right? Maybe we don't need height. I would go, hey, oh, well, we definitely need height, right? So we need it to be the height of everything. But then I wonder if we turned this and we went back here and I did a line item stretch, if I got rid of height, is that gonna, nope. So the one thing we don't need here is this stretch. So I can get rid of this stretch right now. If I do remove flex direction column, you see now they go and they sit next to each other. Not what we want. We want that effect. Well, they'll sit on top of each other. Okay. So then the next thing to turn on flex. So what I want you to see is there's multiple places to turn on flex. It wasn't just one place. It was two places we decided. Okay. And the reason also is because if you turn on flex on this parent here, the children inside of this thing, these three, belong to a parent. Flex is not inherited all the way down. Flex is only applied to the immediate children of the parent that flex is applied to. If you turn on flex here, it applies to these. But if I had elements inside of this, flex would not apply to this. I'd have to turn display flex on this element for it to act like a flex parent.
Is there any way of like looking through your code and realizing like, hey, I don't need this necessarily when you're done like that?
Yeah. So usually what I'll do, once again, I do a lot, same thing. I'll do CSS, get this working, then change something else, someplace else, go back and I'm like, do I even need this thing anymore? I'm not even sure. I comment it out. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I don't need it, but I needed it at some point in time. That's the thing. So usually what I'll do is, just go to developer tools and start looking at things and just start unchecking things. So if I went here and I was like on section and I saw these things here, these properties, I just start playing with them. Do I need flat? Oh, yeah, I need it. All right, do I need flat? Yeah. Once again, you can go through them. Some of them you're going to know hands down, like you need display flex. That's a given. But if you don't know what a property does, why did I do 3? Oh, I don't know, because 3 makes it expand to take like 3 times the amount of space. So the fact that this section was given 3, watch what it looks like without 3, right? It looks like The header and the footer are the dominant elements, and the little tiny section doesn't really take up much space, but the minute we give it a flex of 3, it takes up much more space than the other two elements, right? That's the idea here, okay? And the header was given a flex of 1 here. If I remove flex of 1, what would happen? Header collapses on itself for the content, right? So if you wanted this, you could have, if I didn't want it to be that big, right? Because that's a really huge header, right? Maybe I don't want it to be a huge header. Maybe I would do, I don't know, 0.5. Can I do 0.5? You can play around with this. These are kind of like percentages of the available space. Whatever space is there, we'll play this game, we'll get out of the space, right? So maybe you want to lessen it. But then this thing grows more. And once again, however you want, okay? I could go down to the footer and do the same thing with the footer, because the footer's pretty big. I can now say just 0.5, and now the footer looks smaller, everything looks pretty good, right? What I want to stress here really is how you structure this, okay? And the fact that we turned flex on the container now gives me the ability to use flex on these and play with their heights, right? Relatively easily. Like 0.5, 0.3, whatever. Right? You could have used percentages. I could have said 100 pixels, would have been the same thing. Whatever you want to do. Once again, turning it on gives you that freedom to do other things, right? If you did need to justify content or not line items, you could do that also. What about the third one? What about this one? Does this look like a general layout that would have been applied? Once again, you may have something different. You may have decided to wrap all of this in something, and then wrap this in something, and then wrap these in something. Right now, it's just this section with 2 sections, left and right section, another section with article, article, article. We'll have to target these articles, okay? How you structure this is important, okay? If you're looking to apply flex, when you get to grid, I could have this as one straight structure, no nested elements at all. They could be all at the same level, all children of one parent, and I can put them anywhere I want, which is really cool. So Flexbox is awesome, and it does allow you to do things, but when it comes to a layout like this, I might opt to do grid. I might opt to say, I'm gonna apply grid to this thing. That's just what I'm saying. But you're going to have situations where you're going to have images like this, kind of like an image gallery, and Flexbox is probably the best approach for these images, to have them sit next to each other instead of forcing them into these boxes. All right? You let Flexbox kind of expand and grow and do what you want to do. Okay? I'll post the solution in just a bit. I'm just going to go to the question, see if there's anything in here Flexbox related. I saw a lot of stuff. You're like, why is it necessary to use both grid and Flexbox? It is not necessary, but once again, if you content, I have another article for you to read tonight based on CSS Grid and Flexbox. Just another article that explains it, and they emphasize Flexbox is for content, Grid is for layouts. Like, you don't know what the content's going to be, so you use Grid to just put things there, right? But a lot of the times when you're building out your design, you're also going to be putting in like mock data. I'm going to put in a logo, not your real logo, but a logo. I'm going to put in like links for the navigation. I don't know what your navigation is yet, but I'm just going to put links there. And because that stuff represents content, I make a decision to use Flexbox there. And then I'm just going to have some big general areas that I'm going to be like, oh, that's great. Okay. X typing, not sure what that is. Simple, how do you separate the middle sections to maintain the margins? So is this section here, the middle section, to maintain margins?
Yeah.
Okay. So what you can do, once you turn on Flex, right? Once you turn on Flex, I can just give this a margin. If I target this one element, I can give this one element a margin right, and it'll have a margin right, and the rest of the free space would be separated, right? So if I take a look at this, just to see what was done, I go here, you can see already that this has a margin right. Let me see, does this? And this does not have a margin right. This has a margin right, this one does not have a margin right. and they both are the same width. They both look the same. And we did that by targeting them very uniquely here. And this is something that we had done maybe last week, right? Where I had shown you first of type, last of type, nth of type, right? So the element itself has some properties. In its position, it makes it the first of its type. So I target the sections, dot sections. The section, and I say the first section that you find, give it this property. Okay? First of type, last of type, nth of type. There's lots more, but those were the ones that I had shown you. And so, without practicing this stuff every day a little bit, you're not going to remember nth of type or first of type. You'd have to Google that. How do I target the first element? And then you would come up with something on that first page that's like first of type, right? So learn to like just Google it, ask the question, and I'm sure you would have found the answer. And the same thing here. This has margin, this has margin. This one does not have margin, right? And so I would not target the margin there either, right? So if I went here, I look at it, margin, margin, no margin. At least no margin right. And in the CSS, it would have been here. Last of type, 0. Flex here, I think margin is coming from up top, margin is coming from someplace else, but I'm targeting this one to say do not have margin right. And so we remove it. So I'm just doing last of type, okay? So this structure that we see here will change when we get to grid. It won't be the same structure. We won't need these parent containers to support these child elements because we're gonna have a grid where I can stick things in wherever. I could have something all the way on the bottom, and in grid, I could stick it all the way at the top. So there's different ways to go. Okay, so what I want to do now is this little star right here. I want to just do a little Flexbox challenge. Okay, I'm going to select this out. All right, so this little code pen, fork it, so you have the copy of it. And what we have here is, this is an image. This is the image of what we want our content to look like. So our design team just gave us a layout. That's the layout. And they're like, that's what I want it to look like. Here's the real stuff. You make it look like that. There's only 2 settings that you really need to do. I think only 2 things that you need to do to get this to look like this. Okay? You already know display flags. And you have to play around with the other ones. See if you can figure out the other ones. You're going to make the changes here, obviously in the CSS right here. If you look at the HTML, you'll see the structure. Right? There is a div class flex container. That's this. And these are the flex items. Okay? So see if you can replicate this image with 2 settings. Okay, now put a thumbs up in the Slack channel. When you're done with it, just click on the thumbs up. You finish it, try your hand at the next thing. You're just supposed to. If you aren't done with it, I posted another challenge also in the Slack channel. In where?
The second, for the second.
You mean for this one?
Yeah.
This is the image.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not seeing it?
No.
Oh, okay. Let me see. That's weird. Let me save it. Can you refresh it now? I'm just curious. Maybe I added it, I didn't save it. Is it still not there? Okay. So I'm going to do this. I will upload it to.
Oh, okay.
All right. Can you refresh and see? Is it there?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. You see that? Anyone is still working on the first Flexbox one, just showing you where to turn Flexbox on. You were stuck on that. I hope you weren't stuck on that, but if you were, you turn that on. I'll just give you the hint. It's a line something, something. That's the problem. I'm not giving you the full thing, but it is a line something and then a value. Okay? Once you do it, you'll be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't want you to spend too much time because it's only a two property kind of thing. So I know you were still, I saw you struggling with it. I'm like, I'm just gonna give it to you. So, easy enough. Oh, that? Yeah. So I'm going to give anyone who was working on the additional one just the extra time. We got about 5 minutes, and we'll go over the solution for that. Okay. It was 15 minutes. Looks like people are still working on the second one. I did provide the solution to the first one. It was just display flex. Get rid of that. So what does that tell you, the natural behavior for the flex items? That they naturally do what? Well, they'll naturally do this, right? Go next to each other, but they also take the full width, right? I didn't tell them to do that, and they took the full width, right? So when I did align items center, right, then these items are centered now, and they shrink down to their content. There's some padding, I think, inside of here, right? There's padding, so there's padding. This one stays its height. Why? Because I manually set it. So if you manually set things, they override the Flexbox wanting to like manipulate these things. So just know you can control the element itself, or you can like have some of it controlled and some of it just kind of like let Flexbox do its thing. Either one. It's really just a two property thing here. And always take a look at the CSS. Like look at the HTML. Give it a review. Take a look at the CSS. Your eyes would have pointed that this stands out. It has a height, but the others don't. And you're like, all right, well, this has a height and the others seem not to, so how would I make that happen, right? And so align items here, which is something we did last week. I just showed you how to line something. We lined something center, right, on the vertical and on the horizontal too. Okay, just wanted to see if you remembered it. If not, Google it, take a look at the documentation. Before we go into the other one, I'll walk you through that. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? We come back, I'll walk you through the navigation. What's going on with the nav, okay? Go. Sweet, I got it. All right. So let's just take a look at this. When I talk about applying Flexbox and grid, the one thing I'm always going to stress to do Flexbox is on the nav. That's the one thing I'm always going to say, do Flexbox on. So you have to know Flexbox. You have to at least know it for the nav. And then at times, if you have just a pattern of like images in a row, I might always opt to use Flexbox there. Grid is very like kind of structured and rigid, I would say. There's some fluidity there. But a lot of times, if they're just individual elements that I kind of want to have some flexibility, I go with Flexbox. So just looking at the structure, let's just take a look at the structure, right? I have a header. It's going to be the header. I have an H1, starter matchmaker. I have a UL, LIs, and anchors, right? Easy enough. We know the structure of it. The idea here is we need to have these elements kind of like sit next to each other. And we know Flexbox does a great job at that. You turn on Flex, these things will sit next to each other. So what element am I going to turn on Flex to make them sit next to each other? What is going to be my Flex container? The header, right? So if I go here and I look at the header, I'm just going to find the header here. I have the header. If I was to do display Flex, they sit next to each other. Awesome. And yet, these elements here need to also sit next to each other. So immediately, I have a pressing need for display Flex in two different places. All right, so where am I going to apply Flex on the next thing? Where do I apply it? Yeah, so the UL, right? Or let's take a look here. I have the nav. If I applied it on the nav, there's nothing else in the nav but a UL. And if I want to target these elements, then I have to target the parent, the Flex parent. The UL is the Flex parent. If I target the nav can't control these elements. The nav can only control the UL. It's its child. That's the only thing that it can control. It can't control the LI elements. So we have to find the UL. I have the UL in here. I don't. So we got to add the UL. So I have the header, I have the H1, I have the anchor. So here I would just add a UL and say display flex. And they sit next to each other. Cool. Easy enough to have them sit next to each other. I mean, it looks like Starter Matchmaker. We don't have the logo. We don't really have to do a lot with. It's kind of where I want it to be, right? This doesn't look like it's where we want it to be, right? So how would we get this over here? We could use left margin, right? We could default to the old kind of box model left margin, but does Flexbox allow us to like push things away from each other? Yeah, right? I'm just going to take a look. First, I'm just going to take a look at the size of this. And here's my H1. Here's my UL. All right, so cool. My UL is here. That's the space my UL takes up. Here's my nav. Okay, cool. That's my nav, and it has the UL. And then here's the H1. So I could, on the header, if I went to the header, here's the display flex. If I said justify content space between, I just push them across from each other. This is the available space, right? Just push them away. So I'm going to copy this because that's a setting that I know is what I want, right? So I want that. Get out of here because they updated CodePen, so every time that happens. So I'm going to go to the header and say, justify content, space between, and I got my space between. And this space around these is the padding that I put on the header. Because I wanted space here, so I have padding 10 pixels top and bottom and 20 left and right. Space here, okay? How would I get the elements to all sit in the same vertical line? Align items, right? Same thing we just did earlier. And if I apply that on the header, justify content, align items, center. Look, the items are centered now, right? Items are centered. Cool. I guess the question now is, you know, I'm just trying to get layout. I don't care about removing the underscores, hitting the fonts. We could work on that. That's something you could do on your own, like we've covered that a couple of times. I'm just looking for design. How do I get the space between these? So if I did space around these, I would, but I need space to do that. So if I do go here and I take a look at the nav, well, the nav is like, that's the nav, right? There is no free space inside of this nav to do anything. So we would need to give the nav some sort of space, right? We'd have to say, you should be this space, whatever it is, right? I'm not sure did anyone figure this out? You did margin on the nav? Or you did margin on the elements, right? Okay, so we could go directly into the elements, and we could, right here, could just target all the LIs. Can I? No, I don't have a CSS rule. So in DevTools, I don't have a CSS rule in my CSS up here. There's not a rule that targets LIs. So when I go here, I don't really have an LI rule that I can play with. There's no LI. There's this, but I can't edit that. That's the default that comes with the browser. So if I want to create a rule, then I have to click on this plus sign here so I can play with the rule here. Otherwise, does anyone know what this does? Element.style. Anybody play with it? It should be here all the time. Element.style targets the element that you have highlighted. So if I want to target one thing and like apply settings to the one thing, I do element.style like this. If I just did element.style here and I said margin, what are we doing? Margin, is it just margin right? Just margin right? Oh, just do margin right. Or margin, I don't know, margin let's say 10 pixels. Let's see what happens. Okay, I only targeted the one thing, not all of them. These other ones haven't been targeted. Element style here targets just the element. I want all LIs, and I need a rule in order to apply that. So if I want to create a rule, this little plus sign here, if I click on it, this is just temporary. This is a temporary environment. If I click on it, I have a rule now to target the LIs. All of the LIs I can do this with. And now if we were to do like margin, I don't know, where is it? Margin 10 pixels, boop. Right? Now we have our design. Once again, layouts, we'd still like these are the anchors. You want the anchors to have the full width. So then when you hover, I'm just looking for design. I want you to implement flexbox. And I want you to understand what these are about too. These are important. You're going to be in here all the time working on your final project, all the time trying to edit things. If I help you out, the first place that I go is developer tools. Shoot me your pen, let's go here, and let's start examining it. This gives me much more clarity than looking in the CSS file. I'm like, I don't know, there's a bunch of lines in there, I want to target the thing. So understand element style targets the one thing, and if you don't see a rule in here because you didn't create it in your CSS file, just click on the plus sign, and we'll add the rule, and you can target all. Okay? If I refresh this page, everything goes. I refresh it, this LI rule here and this element style disappears. They don't stay permanent. So I would have to now go into the CSS, into here, to do just that. I don't have an LI, so I create an LI rule, and I do margin, right? Margin, I don't know, 10 pixels, just to get it looking like that. Okay? Easy implementation of Flexbox. Okay? We could have also given the nav a certain width, and then we could have used what? I gave the nav a width, we could have used justify content space between on the LIs, and it would have taken all the space. That's another way to implement this. So instead of doing margin, I'll just show you the other way. You could have said, hey, nav, I want you to be a certain, do we have the nav? Is it here? No, so we don't have nav, so here's header. I'm gonna do the H1, I'll do it just above this. So I would say nav and maybe do, I don't know, width, I don't know, 200 pixels maybe? I think we need more, right? Definitely more. We need like maybe 600 pixels. All right, that's too much, 500 pixels. There, 500 pixels, that means it's all the way over here too, right? So if I go to it, and I highlight this, here it is. Here's the nav, right? Not showing you the whole nav. Here's the nav, goes all the way over there. And then all we'd have to do here is on the UL, because the UL has Flexbox, if we said justify content, space between, right? It's already going, space around or space between. Either way, this will look very similar to what we're trying to achieve, right? I do that, looks almost identical to what we want. Two different ways to get it. You make the decision on how you want to implement this. Visually, we got the layout. Okay? So I'll save this. This is just one way to do it. The margin, I think I like the margin way better because then I can just control the elements individually. I kind of like that. Just allow them to push away. Create the distance, right? Since maybe I don't know the widths of these things, and now I have to determine a specific width of something when I can just do margin, push, and then they all just push each other, create the same amount of space, right? It's less thinking. I just say how much space I want around it versus the nav. I have to say you got to be this big and then take the free space and then do this. That requires more processing, mental processing, okay? So just know this. You're going to make a nav, that's going to be your nav. You'll never, ever really have to like figure out any other unique instances of the nav, okay? Cool. There's our nav starter. All right. So I think we're good. Yeah.
Is there something we can install so that it starts auto-copying rules so I get reference to inspect and developers?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't know if there's a plugin. I know with like Atom, because you were using Atom too. Atom does have like this IntelliSense that allows you to do that. I don't think the CodePen has that. There might be. I'd have to take a look, but I don't think so. Cool. So Flexbox. So we go to Flexbox? Maybe, maybe not. Once again, this is the kind of thing, if you don't practice it every day, a little bit, it's going to be, you're going to struggle with the next time you have to apply it. So every day, build a nav, use Flexbox. I guarantee you after a week, you'll have the nav down and you won't have to do it ever again. Okay? Just little things. Okay? Let's take a look here. So now we're up to grid. We're going to move on to grid. So with grid, I just wanted to show you this little article and to see where kind of grid plays its part and the fact that we have so many technologies to touch on and why we can only touch the surface of certain things so I can get to more things. This is the developer roadmap, somebody that wants to learn front-end development, right? Hey, you start with the basics. This is you sitting in the class, I want to learn just the basics. And even that, in itself, JavaScript is a 10-week course, another 10-week course. Lots of stuff to go into for JavaScript. You're going to learn the basics. Then you go deeper. We're going to be doing responsive next week, okay? Here's CSS. We're going to be using Grid, but if we didn't use Grid, there's front-end frameworks like Bootstrap, Materialize. All of these are layout frameworks. We're not going to learn those. We're going to be doing Grid. It's the new one, okay? Then there's these preprocessors. We're not going to be learning these either. That's just more advanced CSS, okay? So on this side of kind of the design side, right? And then you can go even further, deeper. And here's Grid, and here's Flexbox. You're learning these two. When we get to transitions, you're going to be learning transitions and transforms to move things with animations, okay? This is something that I use all the time, D3. And that's that side. And then on the left side is the JavaScript, all this stuff that you would need to learn. We can't go into as much depth like down here. You won't be learning a lot of this, but you'll be learning the fundamentals of JavaScript, which in and of itself is a lot to wrap your head around. Click events and functions and variables. People are like, they've never seen things like that. I mean, they never came from coding background at all, and all you have is HTML and CSS. When you hit JavaScript, it's like a different world altogether. It's not the same in design. So I just do this to show you. There's a lot, if you want to get good at this, there's a lot that you have to know, and you have to kind of pick and choose what it is that you want to learn, okay? Now, grid in itself isn't a new concept, the idea of grid. This is a Bootstrap. I'm just coming here to show you that Bootstrap, I'm just looking for the grid layout. Bootstrap has been using grids for a long time. This is a Bootstrap grid. Bootstrap would say, if I give a class of col-12 and then col and d8 to this div on a large screen, it would take up the full 12 columns, and on a medium screen, it would take up 8. And so it's built into Bootstrap. It's this kind of responsive design. So these numbers represent the amount of columns, but also the view, the width of the screen. Larger screens, smaller screens. What I'm just trying to show you is that, is there a better one? I thought it was it. No, that was it. I thought they had one that had more columns and rows. Yeah. Okay. And these columns and rows are then, and we'll get into this when we get to responsive, are determined by the pixel width of the page. It's 540. This class takes effect. 720, this class takes effect. So this grid system, it's been around for a really long time. Bootstrap has implemented it heavily. Other tools like Materialize is another one that I've used, another framework, they also use it, okay? It's just, for Bootstrap, it's a 12-column structure. Columns, rows, like what we're gonna do here, okay? So just wanted to show you that grid has been around, and we're gonna be doing it. And we're going to be playing around with grid. And same like Flexbox, there's great documentation on grid. It's the same site that had the Flexbox content. And they really break down grid and kind of how to use it and all the properties, okay? The one thing that I want to point out, just like when we did Flexbox, and when we turned on Flexbox, right? To get Flexbox going, it was display flex, right? Display flex, right? When we get to grid, grid is going to be display grid. Okay? Easy to turn it on. This turned it on for that, and it's the same concept. This becomes, when you use this, you turn it on the parent element. So the main container becomes the grid container, and then it affects the child containers, but not children of those children, only the immediate descendants. So once again, this box, instead of doing display flex, if I did display grid here, right, I'd only affect these, but if there were other elements inside of here, these would not be affected by grid. I cannot control them with grid. If I wanted grid to apply to these, then I'd have to apply grid to this also, then I can apply grid, just like we did with the nav, right? Turn display flex on the header, both of those elements, the H1 and the nav were affected, but I wanted the UL, so I had to go to the UL display flex, and then that took effect. So this is nested grids. That's really what it is. Nested flex box, nested grids, same concept. So the first thing we would need to do is to turn on grid in order to get this to work the way we want it to work, right? So let's do this. Make that a grid. We're going to go through grid. Just going to open up the code pen. I kind of want to do the image gallery. Kind of like the image gallery. The image gallery was what I showed earlier. Let me get rid of this. No one wants to see that anymore, right? Get rid of Flexbox. We'll go back to the questions. Flexbox, layout starters, layouts, two columns. Where's the design? Is this it? Yeah, this was it. Just gonna zoom out a little bit. So what I'd like to do, just to do something more kind of colorful, is create this grid pattern, okay? So this particular grid pattern, what you can see is like, look at, this is the container, right? There's the container, and then there's this image gallery. The container is just used to do what? What do you think the container is being used here for? Because I have a container, and then I have a gallery, and the gallery has the things. Visually, what do you think I'm using a container for here? I could be using it, but remember, grid is applied to the parents. The things that I want to hit are the things inside of gallery. So gallery is probably where we want to apply grid. Why am I using the container? Just visually, why am I using it? To give height and width and to center it. That's it. Remember, a container is, a lot of the times a container is the first thing. Even in Bootstrap, Bootstrap uses a container and then puts rows inside the container. Here, I'm just visually using the container and I'm giving it a certain width, maybe like 70%. And then how do I center this there? How did I center it? How did I get all the space here and all the space here to evenly divide? Margin 0 auto. So I did margin 0 auto and we got it. I just want it clear, like what's happening. That's how we got that original design, okay? That's the container. So it's 80%. And then I put margin top just because I wanted to push it from the top, and then auto centers it. That's our design. Okay? So let me select this out. And we'll do this because this is really cool. Little image gallery. Okay. All right. So we're going to go here. So it's the same structure, right? I think the container here might just be a little different. Let me see. 800 pixels, margin, border, and then here I gave it a height. That's the real. This is the only. Just going to move it toward the bottom. This is the only thing that's different between the design that you just saw and this design, right? That's the only thing, which means, remember when I said sometimes there's these leftover things and you're like, do I even need it? Well, if I remove this, things collapse. which means later when we get grid, I'm going to go back to this and be like, I don't need that anymore, okay? But I do now so that you can see this, because if I get rid of the height on the container, oh, I don't need it. Look at that. Don't think I need it. I thought I did. Still think I do. I think as we apply stuff, I'm going to see it. So, you know what? I will comment it out. Why don't we comment it out? All right. So the first thing that we need to do is make a decision. I'm going to go back to our thing here, right? So I'm going to go here. What's the decision we need to make? Well, this is a grid layout, right? Grids are going to have columns and rows, right? So based on this, where do we see columns? Where do you naturally see maybe the breakup of columns? Like, or how many columns do you see? How many rows do you see? How about this? How many columns do we see? 3 columns, right? That looks good, right? I mean, I see this little image here, this little image here, and then this big image over here, right? So to me, that looks like 3 columns. And what about rows? What do we got for rows? 3 rows. So I have this over here, right? And then we have this. And then this. So yeah, so it does look like, if we're talking about our columns, we have this as 1 column, right? This as another column, and then this as the 3rd column, right? We made the decision that this would be a row, this would be a row, and this would be a row, okay? So we have this 1 row here, 2nd row, 3rd row, 1 column here, 2nd column, and 3rd column. So now we've broken up our design, okay? And I draw these lines out because once we get to grid, we're going to see that these lines are actually the starting point for us making a decision where something exists. Like this is going to be 1, 2, this one's 3, this will be 3, and I believe that's going to be 4. Like these lines are going to be targeted later. We're going to be able to use the lines to say, I want you to be in the 1st row, and I want you to span in the 1st row, and I want you to be like span 1 to 2 things, because we can clearly see that this big image must be spanning how many rows does this big thing span? 2, right? So there must be some sort of logic for us to say, I want you to start at this top row and span 2 rows, right? I want you to start here and just stay in this 1 little cell. I want you to stay here. I want you to span here. So we can move across the rows and up and down the columns for us to get this effect, okay? So let's start working with grid and get this little. Let me go in here. All right, so I'm going to go back here. So where are we going to turn on grid? The gallery, right? The gallery. So I'm just going to kind of collapse these things. So you can see that the gallery contains the 6 things that we want to position, which means that's where you turn display grid on. So we're going to go to the gallery, and I'm going to say display grid. Nothing happens. This isn't Flexbox. Nothing happens when you turn on grid. Everything remains the same, okay? And so now we have to target the individual elements and tell them where they need to go, okay? But before we do that, this pattern here, we need to define, okay? So we turned on, we did display grid, right? There's a handful of properties, display, grid, that turns it on, but it does nothing for us, okay? We need a few additional properties to tell it how many columns and how many rows we want. So I'm gonna go back here, okay? And I am gonna say grid template columns. We're gonna say how many columns do we want? Well, we said we wanted 3, so we could go with 3. Well, when we tell it the amount of columns, we're going to tell it the amount of columns but we're going to define the space of those columns, okay? When we define the space of those columns, we could do it like this. So the number of columns is how many times I reference numbers here, and then the width of those columns is going to be the number. So if I was like, I don't know, the first one I want it to be 100 pixels, and like, I don't know, 400 pixels. Did you see things change? Like grid is starting to be like, whoa, you're changing some things up, okay? And it's trying to force these things into position now. We're not finished yet, okay? So we did this, we got grid, that's the property, and then we got grid, template, columns, okay? And here we tell it how many columns by defining these numbers and the space for every column. So if you see 3 numbers, you know that those 3 numbers represent 3 columns. Okay? And here I did put, I'm going to change this right now. I don't want to do that. I'm going to do this 1FR. I'm going to tell you what this is, because you're going to see this kind of more often. You know how Flexbox just knew the available space? You turned on Flex 1 and it was like, hey, we're all just going to like grab up the individual free space. And we could grab it all up, right? Here we could say this and hard code it, or I could just allow grid to be like, hey, 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. And this is a new thing with grid. This is not something you're going to see outside of grid. It's a fractional unit. And what it says is, hey, we have all this space, right? So why don't you take one fractional unit, you take another fractional unit, you take the third fractional unit. Let's take it up and we'll divide it, you know, essentially like 33.3333%, right? But this is even more accurate than you doing it as 33.33%. It just takes it all and it does it for us. So now we have 3 beautiful columns separated, and we just told it these fractional units. I don't have to play a guessing game like, well, you're 200 pixels, you're 200 pixels. I can just say whatever space is there, you break it up. You make the decision. Just like Flex did it for us, this is another world. At any point in time, though, I could mix and match. I could say, if I wanted to, for the first one, I could say 200 pixels. I could. For the middle one, I could say, I don't know, 50%. Like, you can use these values interchangeably. So you will see things like the FR used with percentages, used with pixels. You're going to see them used interchangeable. Whatever the person was who was trying to get the design, okay? It's just back to that. Flexbox could have implemented it several different ways, could have structured it several different ways. This is the same concept. Whatever you make the decision to do, okay? So I would say here, now the way I have it split up is this. I'm going to do 1FR, 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 and I'm actually going to have them divided into 4 separate columns. This is just the design that I came up with, okay? Instead of trying to do the 3 separate columns, I'm going to do these 4 columns. We can go back and change it, okay? So now I have columns. What do I need now? Rows, right? So I'm going to go to grid, template, rows, and do the same thing. Like, we wanted kind of 3 rows, we said. I could say 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. I'm actually going to give it 5. The design that I have has them as 5 separate columns. And I'll explain why. Because in the design, it's like, these are really tiny. I created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm even doing less than where I pulled this from. I'm going to show you, after we do our design, I'm going to show you the kind of tutorial where this came from. But I saw it, I loved it, I built it, and I was like, this is great. It's going to be a great way to teach this. So let's just say we have this. Things changed a little bit, right? Because once again, if I get rid of the template rows, did it? Okay, just moved it down a little bit, right? Here's our columns, here's everything. All right. The other thing that I see here is See this little gap, right? We did that with what before? When we did Flexbox, what did we do? We did margin to push things aside. We did justify content, space between, to get some space between things. We can now, with this, do grid gap. And I'm just going to say 15 pixels because that's just the number I came up with. Look, I immediately create a gap between all of them. Just a cool way. We could do grid column gap, grid row gap, or you could wrap it up into grid gap. So I just did grid gap. But once again, I could do this. Grid column gap. I could do, oh, did I misspell it? Yeah. Column, right? And I could also do grid row gap, 15 pixels. Could do either or. Or you wrap it up as just grid gap, and then it's the sum of both of them. Okay? Cool. Right? We're starting to get there. We have these rows. We have our columns. You can clearly see the outline now, like columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I have template rows, but I don't have enough content, so there's no more stuff here, right? Or is there? Like, are there rows? I just don't see them. Maybe there are rows. Maybe I don't see them, right? But there are. There's actually some stuff here. We just don't see it, okay? I went to developer tools. I think we could. See that? In developer tools, if I highlight it, I see the grid pattern. I see a nice boxy grid, like 1, 1, 1, 1, and then everything is nicely even, which means if I had more elements, I could have a nice little image gallery, just like this, just as designed. I could put as many images as I want. That could easily be like Pinterest, right? Bunch of stuff evenly divided in rows, right? Probably maybe how they do it, okay? So we have this design, okay? So now we want to target the individual elements, right? So I put grid template columns, and then we have grid template rows, okay? And I did 1 F5, 1 and 1 F5, right? There's an easier way to do this also. Just kind of like doing it the long way, just like we did with the CSS, so you get used to it. So now we need to target the individual elements, right? Okay. So now it's time to hit the individual elements. And so if we take a look in here, I see the individual elements are these figures, right? I have a figure. This has a class of gallery underscore item. And there's a gallery underscore item 1. So this is used to target all of the figures, and this is to target the unique ones, right? So instead of doing first of type, last of type, nth of type, we've given them classes here to specifically target them, right? Okay. So let's target the first one, okay? So I'm gonna go down here, and I have this item right here. Now, obviously the first one and the second one, they're almost where we want them to be, right? If I was to take a look at this, they are almost, or they are where we want them to be, but we still need to tell them to be there, okay? Or do it, maybe we don't. But let's just tell it to be there. So we're gonna do this. For those settings are for the parent, right? This is for the parent itself, and now we have for the child. So just like in Flexbox, we have Flex 1, Flex 2, and there's several other properties that we never got around to. We're going to assign them here. These properties are grid, column, okay? And when we do grid column, we're gonna tell it what column it should start at and what column it should end at. So I'm gonna say 2, see if this works. Nothing seems to break. Everything looks good. What we don't see here is this. Just because we when I went to DevTools, we see this, but what we're missing here is Chrome doesn't do the best job with grid. Firefox is a better tool. We're not going to use Firefox for the rest of the class, but Firefox provides a better tool for us to see the grid lines and the grid pattern. So I'm just going to open it up in Firefox real quickly so I can show you what this looks like. Okay, I'm going to open up Firefox. I don't usually work with Firefox. And I'm going to just go here. Here's Firefox, right? I got to plug in my. All right, I'm going to go to Developer Tools in Firefox. And if I do this little gallery thing, oh, you see what just happened? What happened? What do we see? Yeah, you see the spacing, right? And you see what else? What else just appeared? The grid. What else do you see that we didn't see before? Which is the reason why I'm using this tool, so you can visually see it. What's that? Yeah, those little numbers, right? So remember I said these things, I drew like the columns here, and I drew these numbers here, right? Like this represents column 1, column 2, column 3 in the rows, but these things are surrounded by these lines, and the lines have numbers, and I can use those numbers to say, I want you to start at row 1 and go to like row 2, and that's where I want you to sit. But I want you to go to line 2, not row 2. So I want to confine you to this space here for a row, and then for a column, I want you to start at the line 1 and go to the line 2. Which means for this one, I want this one to start at line 2 in column and go to line 3. So I'm going to target the lines to do that. So I wanted you to see this because this really makes it clear what's happening, right? It's pretty obvious what's happening here. And if I move this down, you can see that all of the columns and rows are created. They're all there, and they all have their numbers, right? You even see things like negative numbers, too. The negative numbers can be used to span a whole thing. I can say start at line 1 and go to -1, and that takes you to the opposite end. So I don't have to be like, go to line 5, right? Whatever this line would have been up here, okay? So now that we understand that, right, what's going to happen here? Let's just put this over here. And we're going to try to do that now with the other elements. So I got grid column for the first one, and I'm going to do it with the second one. I'm going to do grid row 1, and I'm going to go to 2, right? The numbers. Nothing happens. Nothing's changed. Everything looks the same, right? Everything looks identical here. Okay. Well, we're going to do the same thing with the second one. So I didn't create a rule for the second one. So I'm just going to copy this particular one, paste it, and then just tell it, right? Everything seems like it's just falling into place because grid's like, I have these rows and columns. I have this content. So I'm just going to use and be intuitive and like put the things there. Okay. So maybe we don't even need to do this. So actually this, you know, we won't do that. Let's go to the third one and let's do something with the third one, right? So let's go back to the design. Oh yeah, I need the sound going. Right, so let me do this. All right. So let's take a look. There's 1, 2, look at the third one. The third one would start at what line? 1, 2, 3, right? Start at line 3. So if I went to the third one and I said grid, column, and I said start at line, am I starting at line 3 or am I starting at line 2? Like 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I'm starting at 3. So I would say grid column 3. And where are we going to go to? Well, once again, how many columns do we have? I'm going to go back here to our CSS and just see, right? I have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. Right? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth line, right? So I'm going to say start at line 3 and go to line 5. Do you see it changed? These represent the grid lines. That's the thing that we have to kind of wrap our head around. It's a new thing. This is just, it's a really new design. Grid is new, but it's really taking off. But these here represent grid lines. Okay? And the grid lines are how we can do it. And then we're also going to have this, like 1, 2, 3, right? This would be 4 in this design. Ours has a few more. So the grid lines are these lines and those lines, whichever in, and then the blue just represents the columns, visually the columns. But when we position these things, we have to tell it what's your starting line, what's your ending line. We have to do it for the columns, and we have to do it for the rows. So now that we have this, if I say, okay, so I got it to the columns, right? I got it for the row, I'm sorry. Oh, the columns, we want to go from here to here. We're doing columns. If I go back here, we want to go further down, right? So our row is going to start at row 1 and go where? 1, 2, I have 3, 4 because I have another one here. So let's go here. And now I'm going to say grid row, right? And we're starting at the first row, right? And we're spanning how many? I think we're going down to 5, right? Oh, is that here? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. That's why I was like, why is it not working? So do I go to 5? It's going all the way down. Maybe that's too much, right? So I'm going to say 4. Better. Right? I mean, we're getting there. So knowing these grid lines is key to you placing it. Yeah.
I'm just curious what would happen if you assign 2 different elements in the same space.
They hide behind each other. It's a great way to layer things. So if somebody clicks, I could just remove the thing and then you see the thing behind it. So you can tell these things to be wherever you want. I could take this image here that in the HTML is clearly the first one. I could take that image and put it down here by telling it where in the grid you should be. So this whole kind of structure of flexbox, put it in a parent container and then turn on flex and oh, we want to put that in a parent container, right? I could have a straight flat structure where everything is just a sibling to one another and then just move them around like little blocks. You're going to be down here, you're going to move up here, right? Now, although you have the flexibility to do that, should you do that? Remember, somebody is looking at your HTML looking to make sense of it. If you're just everything is in one row and you're what's the structure? Where is everything? Because you can just put anything anywhere doesn't mean you should lack structure here. If something is a main, it should be a main and it should have sections inside it, right? If something represents an article, it should be an article and it should be aggregated with the content that it belongs to. You shouldn't just do main, section, article, aside, blah. Right? When those things are nested inside of each other, you shouldn't do that. You can, and with grid, you have the flexibility to do whatever you want, but you shouldn't. The HTML should make sense. You're not the only person that's going to look at it, right? Somebody else, when you leave the company, somebody's going to look at the HTML and be like, I don't know what the hell this person was doing. Everything is there's no structure. I don't really know how to make sense of things anymore. So make it make sense. This is just an image gallery, so it's easy to have 6 images like this. If I was to create an image gallery using Flexbox, I'd do the same thing. I would do the same structure, okay? So let's go to image 4 now, right? So this is 1, 2, 3, and you see how I didn't have to touch image 2. it stayed there. I probably don't even have to touch image 1. I could probably remove the settings from image 1 because it just defaults there. This one defaults there. So if it's where it defaults to, let it stay there, but apply the settings to the things that need to be applied. So for this image 4 right here, what's our grid column? What is it? 1 to what? 2, 3. Cool. Boom. And then we're going to do grid row. And what's our grid row? Our grid row is going to be 2 to 4, I believe, right? Boom. See? Now they're in line. This is the line 4. Okay? Now, based on this image right here, see if you can apply the last 2. So I'm going to save this. If you didn't do anything, you were watching, great. It's awesome. Like, you're absorbing it. But I want to see if you can get these 2 images in their appropriate boxes. Okay? I saved the settings. CodePen was slacked out, right? I may have slacked it out. Yeah, so you have it. Once again, just position those last 2 boxes. What's that? Oh, I posted it in the CodePen. So the one that I have in the CodePen, oh, I'm sorry, the one I posted in Slack. So if I go to Slack, I slacked it out earlier. This is it. And if I open it up, we should see the changes. Yeah, it opened up on my other window, but you should see it. This is the one that I said fork. So just post it in Slack to click on the thumbs up. If you get it, just click on the thumbs up. I just want to. Just give it about another minute. If you didn't get it, that's fine. Oh, so you're saying, got it. So the thing that we're reproducing, right, is that. See these two images here? Those are the two images. This and there. This here. And then this is what we're working with here. Okay. Okay. So just kind of put them side by side. Again, if anyone else got it, just click on the thumbs up. I'm just trying to keep track. Okay. So let's make, let's apply this, right? So I'm going to use the same thing, right? The same pattern, grid, column. Now I'm going to say, what's the column? Well, I want it to go from the first column line, and I want to go 1, 2, 3 to the third column line. That's where I want it to go. Then I say grid row. I want it to go from the 1, 2, 3 to the fifth column row, I believe, right? Nope. Do you see how they're sitting on top of each other? So I was incorrect with the placement. See how they're sitting on top of each other, right? So this is one line up, and so now they're having this layered effect. They're sitting on top of each other. So that tells me this should be row 4. And where is it? And should that be row 4? Oh, I just messed up. Oh, and this should be row 4, 6, right? See, went to 6. And once again, for the last one, grid, column, we want it to be 1, 2, 3, the starting line, and we want to go to what, 5? 5. And then grid, row, we want it to go from 4 to 6 because they're both the same. And we have a nice image gallery. Yay, image gallery. Okay. It's a lot more fun than doing just, you know, sections and articles. It's not as much fun. And you are going to be working with images. Like everybody's going to want an image on their site. And so this, if you wanted an image gallery like this, then you can have it. You might want to show portfolio pieces. Maybe you want to just do that. There's the big one that you're really proud of, and there's some other ones. However it is that you want to do it. Okay. There's other image type galleries that we can assign. This is one. And so what I'm going to say though is like, we're going to take a break in just a few minutes. Is in Flexbox, there was a lot of ways to do things. In Grid, there's like 3 or 4 different ways to do just this. Okay? I can't teach all of the ways. I'm teaching you the ways that you're going to see more common. This is a common way of doing it. And then there's going to be another way that I find to be the more efficient of the ways. But the fact that I know you're going to be examining things and see other grid implementations and see this, I don't want to have taught you one way and you're like, I don't know what the hell this is. We never learned this. I learned this other way. So what do these things mean? You have to know this. This is key. Learning about these grid lines is key. Knowing about rows and spanning across rows and spanning across columns is the fundamental thing with grid. Now we can put things anywhere. Like I said, I could, if I wanted, I could have taken this one image right up here, image 1, and I could have put it, if I copy this, actually this is the last one. So if I copy this, watch, if I copy this, I could put it up top if that's where I wanted to go, look. And I moved it up top. The image that was here is now there. There's nothing there because I told nothing to be there. But there's 2 images up there, one's on top of the other. And the fact that this one superseded this one, why do you think that is? Yeah, because it reads from top to bottom. The last image was the one that we read last, right? Or the one that's being applied here in the HTML. It's going through, and it's like, oh, you want to be up here, so I'm going to move you. There's something up there, so I'm just going to put you on top. That's it, okay? If I try to reverse it, the idea was, my original idea was, yeah, I'll move this image down here, right? So if I took this and I was like, all right, I want to apply that here and get rid of these, well, that doesn't work, right? Because the first image was applied and put here, and then by the time we got to the 6th image, the 6th image was layered on top of this. So now you have a layered effect. There's another image right behind this, but we don't see it, okay? Because we told it. So there's a lot of power here, right? You have the ability to tell elements exactly where you want them to be in the layout. None of this confusion like grid and like space and flood, like that's confusing. Now we have the ability to like use these fractional units to tell things exactly. Just take the free space, define it up as many times as you need. And even though there's some flexibility here, it's still a rigid kind of grid system. Like this gives you a little bit more flexibility. Flexbox, flexible. Grid is more like, these are the rows. You can make them flexible, but there's only so much of a design implementation can you force upon this. But there's some unique things that you can do. Awesome. So why don't we take another 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and take some questions maybe, and continue to work. Shake that off, Allie. Shake that off. Shake that off.
Question about the numbers.
Sure.
Like how to use the numbers, like to kind of move the boxes.
So the numbers, so these numbers, right?
Is it always 5?
Well,
That's how we divided it.
Yeah, because we divided it into 4 columns and 5 rows, right? So the first column, the first line will always be 1, and the ending line for the first column will always be 2.
Okay.
And then 2 will be the first line for the second column, and 3 will be the ending line for that column. And then, so you just looking at this, you would be looking at it this way. It's easier to look at and say, all right, I'm going to start at line 1 and go to line 2 and go from row 1 to row 3, and then I would dominate this whole block.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what we're doing with the lines. And I do 1 / something. I'm doing it to say started this number row line, and then go to this line. So we're using
Okay.
lines as the means of doing it.
Okay.
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 We don't see it here. You know, once we're here, you don't really see the lines, right? They're not there, so it's hard to be like, where are they?
How do you, is there a way to display it so that you see the line?
Well, Firefox. There's a third-party tool I'm going to show everyone, but Firefox is really the only tool that allows us to do it.
Okay.
Very well. So I'm going to head out.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
But class is great. I feel comfortable with grid. I've done it before.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah, so I'll follow along.
Have you used grid areas then? Oh, so you're, all right, yeah, you're like a grid master now. Yeah. All right.
Is this class being recorded?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
check the recording too. Thank you so much.
Okay. So just if you could fill out an exit ticket then. when you- Okay.
Yeah, so-
Awesome. Thanks, Emma.
Pretty awesome guys. Yeah, obviously. They're superstar fans right now. It's like my first celebrity That's true. It's just like it's a sport to me. I guess it's one of the I walked past me twice. We're all together. Yeah. With their wives? Or just no, it's just like they're walking around with that guy. Like, I see videos of them like oh, Billy. Oh, they're doing it on the street. Yeah, yeah. So cool. Okay.
All right. So let's jump back in. So to think, like, this is where we started, just this bunch of images, right? Images, large images, and we turn those images into that, right? So really awesome tool for us to do this, okay? I don't know if I had to do this with Flexbox. I'm not really sure I could do this with Flexbox. Not sure how I would. Not sure how I would get these things over here. So if I had to do it with Flexbox, I'd probably have maybe one container here and another container here. Two big containers, and then turn on Flexbox, and then do something like wrap. Give these a width, a specific width. Give these two big widths. Do flex wrap, and then they wrap around and they go down. So you can implement the same design using Flexbox. But once again, yeah, and now I need additional containers to move things. Because I can't do this with Flexbox where I'm going to take this up. So I would need this to be Flexbox here, another parent container, and then do Flexbox. And these things should just naturally sit like that, right? Because that's what they do. They sit on top of each other. So that works. And then these, because they need to sit next to each other, give them a specific width, do these, and then flex wrap, and then wrap. Once again, using grid makes it easier, right? You just tell it where you want it to go, and I can move this image down here at any point in time. With grid, with Flexbox, you couldn't do that. I'd have to physically go in here, take this div, cut it out of here, put it over here, move this one back up here. I'd have to do that. But with grid, you can move anything, any place, anytime, which is cool, okay? And, you know, on the site, they walk you through kind of what we were doing, you know, setting up the different sizes, right? Grid template columns. You can use anything you want. There's 40 pixels, 50 pixels. Auto is another setting. We'll get into that. Auto kind of defaults to the size of the content. Whatever the size of the content is, that becomes the size of the column, right? We wanted to force it because we wanted to have this real steady grid of what we wanted. So, or in this instance too, it's like take 40 and 50, 40 and 50, and the remaining stuff could be auto, okay? There's a long way of doing it. Like we did the shorthand for the elements. Here's grid column start, grid column end, grid row start, grid row end. I don't want to do this. So we did the numbers, number / the end. We rolled that up into something that to me just makes more sense, okay? We can even give the lines names if we want. I could say the first line, the line 2, like there's so many things that you can do with this. You're just gonna pick 1 or 2 ways to go and run with it. Otherwise, you're gonna try to implement everything under the sun and you're just gonna get lost. You see how here now they've named them. This is the first line, the second line, so you can reference them here. Maybe it makes more sense there. I don't know. Doesn't make much more sense to me. I've seen it done in all sorts of ways. Cool. So feel good with grid, right? Basics of grid. Awesome. Let's take it to the next level. Bloop. So what we were going to work with grid was, this was going to be my code, taking this and moving some things around. Moving and turning it into like one of those layouts where we could move certain things and put them into position, right? So in the HTML, we have a specific structure. And once again, there's a lot more stuff going on here. So it's kind of like, I don't know, more things to look at. I thought doing the images would just be kind of easier. Easier, it's less to work with, we move some things. But in the end, we could apply the same grid pattern here, where you can move things around where we want, okay? So, I want you to start working with grid. So, what we're gonna do is, you know enough about grid to kind of get it going. Let's go to the layouts. So, we're gonna start with new layouts because it's a game changer, right? I don't want to go back to where we did Flexbox and we had a grid, we had a box around a box, and we don't need boxes as much anymore. So here, let's start with one, and then I'll let you work on the others. So our layout is the same layouts as they were. Here's the layout that we're shooting for, right? A header. This will be, I'm going to call this a section, though. We know that that's going to be a section. Maybe this should be the whole main thing. That's going to be an article, and that'll be a footer. We'll just name it that way. But that's still what we're looking for, right? Let's go ahead and create them. So let me slack this out. We'll walk you through the first one, and then I'll get you started working. And see, okay? So I'm in the first layout, right? I'm going to zoom in so you have it. Here's our first layout. 2-column layouts. And we know that we want to have a header. I'm just going to use, Emmet. I'm going to say header, and I have a header. I'm going to give it text now. I want to see the text. I just want to see boxes. So header. We know that we're going to have a section. I do curly braces here. I can type in some text. You can manually do it too. Whichever's easiest for you. I can do, what is it? Was it an article or a side? Was it? I think it was an article, right? So article, and footer, right? That's our thing. Cool, I'm gonna save it. We got lost. One thing, I'm gonna open up the things that I send out, fork them, but have my original one open, so in case you get lost, you just go back and look at it. It's easy enough. Always have 2 tabs open up. One to mine, one to yours. If you just feel like watching the code along, watch. If I say do this thing, then be like, oh man, I got to fork it again because now I need one to have my own changes. That's fine. So if we're here, now I don't need this whole like box in another box. I don't really need that unless I want to do grid inside a grid. I don't really want to do that. Can we pull this thing off like this? Can we do that? Sure. Let's go back to the layout. How many rows do we need here? How about that? Pretty easy. How many rows? 3 rows. 1, 2, 3 rows. How many columns? Looks like 2 columns, right? It looks like this big column and then this column. So 2 columns. 3 rows, 2 columns. So in our CSS, right, I'm going to look for, once again, the container, because where do we turn grid on? The parent element that contains the children that we want to move around, right? So here in our container on line 46, I would do display grid. Remember, nothing happens. Nothing's going to happen. I'm also going to do this just so that we have context. I am going to maybe put a border 1 pixel solid around the container. Now I see like the container looks like it's only that big, right? That has that height. So we probably want to maybe give it some height so we have more space here. And so it'll just take up some space. So let's do maybe height, I don't know, 100%, is that? Boom, okay, cool. So it's 100% of our thing. Awesome. 100% of our thing. All right, okay. So I'm gonna try to do this. I'm just gonna put a comment here and I'm just gonna be like grid. These are grid specific things. So these will be grid specific things and then these will be like additional settings, right? So I might even organize it like this. I think I'm going to put the grid specific settings as the first, and then I'm just going to do here maybe, additional CSS. Just so that we know. Anything that's grid specific will be here, and so you'll look and you'll see grid, and anything that's like border, height, whatever, background color can be there, and you won't confuse the two. Try to organize the things so that the things that have a relationship with one another are kind of grouped together. Sometimes I do it alphabetical, which means that everything is out of order or not grouped. And then sometimes I like to group them so that I see the grid specific settings, the flexbox specific settings. So what are we doing here? What was our agreement? What did we say we want? We want, according to that, we're doing columns first, right? We said 2 columns. Is that what we said? 2 columns. So let's hit it. So this is grid template columns, and we want 2 columns, but I'm just going to go back here. Those 2 columns are not the same width. One is clearly at least twice the size of the other one. So if we do the 1FR, they're both going to be the same size. So in here, we'd have to do something like, I don't know, maybe like 3FR, 1FR. All right, things are moving around. It's a little weird, right? Grid is trying to place things. It's like, all right, you have 2 columns, and I'm going through the content, and I'm like, I'm going to put this thing in that column, put this thing, and then I'm going to move the next thing down here. What grid is doing is it's creating new rows for us. That's what it's doing. Created a row, right? I did columns, but I clearly see kind of another row being created here, right? So let's go. I'm going to do this and do grid template rows. And we said, based on this design, we want 1, 2, 3 rows. All right. And for the space of those rows, maybe the top and the bottom row could be like, I don't know, 0.5 fractional units. The middle one could maybe be, I don't know, 3 fractional units. I'm just making up numbers here. 0.5 fractional units. Let's see. Oh, okay. Things changed a little bit. So this 0.5 that's what our thing is going to look like. If we want it smaller, we could change it. If we wanted it to be a physical size, I could change this to say, I want my header to be 100 pixels. Well, that's too big, right? Maybe I want it to be 50 pixels. Boom, that looks nicer, right? You don't have to use the fractional units everywhere. You can tell it to be a certain height if that's what you want. I want it to like play the game of like grab the space from there and put it over here. I need you to be 100 pixels always. Okay, which means if I'm going to do it with the header, I'm going to do it with the footer. So I'm going to say 50 pixels. Now, this row is 50 pixels, but look, there's nothing in the row, right? But it is 50 pixels in height. That's 50 pixels in height. And now we have to manipulate the rest of the things, right? So I think we've done enough with the parent element that we should move on to what? The children, right? So let's go to the header and tell the header where we want the header to be. So that would be what, grid column. Hey, for the grid column, I want you to start at what line? What line are we starting at? 1. What line are we going to? 3. Remember, this is the first line. We have a second column here. That's line 2, and this is line 3. Okay? The lines are what we're targeting here. Okay? And now, if I have the header, I could probably just go down to the footer and do the same thing, right? The footer, we could say grid column, right? Was it grid column, right? Look, I mean, I don't need a grid row here. This thing works fine for the header. I could say grid column, and we're doing the same thing, 1 and 3. And that works too. I almost think like we didn't have to do a whole lot. I almost didn't have to even force these things to be anywhere. A placeholder isn't what though?
Sorry, when I say placeholder, I mean like finding the boxes that they should live in. Like, I mean, people have to blank and like grid is,
Yeah.
But would there ever be a scenario where that's not like sufficient in best practice to always like every single item assigned to that?
No, I mean, just think, I didn't assign the section or the article, and they are where we kind of want them to be.
But there's not like something that might happen.
There's always going to be some. I mean, this is pretty limited, this site, right? There's not a lot of stuff here. When we hit mobile responsive and we want to move things around and make things disappear, we might, at that point in time, have to force these things to be where we want them to be. It's just part of the design. But this looks pretty good. I almost don't think we need to do anything else, just based on the position of the elements right here, based on how we created them here, and we defined our grid. It's like, all right, so you told this thing to be there, so I'm going to move this thing down to the next row, right? And this thing just looks like it should be 3 FR because that's the column, and there's only one thing next to you, so you're just going to be 1 FR, and you force the thing to be here, right? So it's taking the free space and it's doing it. We probably want to like make sure that this thing is here. So we're going to manually do it because I want to enforce the lines. I want you to understand the lines. So we have the section here, and I would do the same thing. Grid, column, right? For this, it's going to be 1, 2, what, 2? Once again, we don't even need to do row. The thing is where it needs to be. So if I do grid row, we do 2, 2, 3, right? That should do it. But what's that? Oh yeah, so there is no mean. So I'm going to get rid of the mean. Once again, we don't have a mean anymore because we're just doing this flat layout, just so that we can wrap our head around this. If I did grid row and I did to 4, look, it's pushing down. It's going further, right? It's almost like creating new things. Like, I don't know, grid row 5. Oh, it's not going to go anymore. I think we pushed our 6. No. So 4. Right, 3? Was it? There we go. And I'm just going to do the same for the article. But article, I have to remove main because this was a throwback to Flexbox. And so now here we would do once again grid column 2 to line 3. Grid, oh, I spelled this wrong. Grid row 2 to 3, right? That should work. And if I did 1 to 3, I would take over or move things around. Like, once again, if you mess it up, everything's getting haywire now. Things are moving. I didn't expect that to happen. I thought it would just go start at the beginning, but I was wrong. Okay? If you did want to implement this design with a parent container, right, and you want to use grid, then you would need grid in 2 separate places, right? And maybe that's what you want here. I'm showing you the flexibility of grid. That these things can be just lined up like this, and that works, but I probably wouldn't want to write my HTML like this. This was mean, I want to put them in main. I'd want to be there. I'm just trying to show you the easiest implementation if we just have 4 elements and we can put them where we want, right? Bam, 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 we get it. Cool? So that means, any questions on this? Like, any questions on what we're doing? Yeah.
How ubiquitous is grid across like browsers?
So if we want to see a particular technology and see across browsers and where the level of support, there's a site, caniuse.com. So I'm going to send this out. Let me select this out. And so can I use is going to tell us the technology. So I'll do CSS grid, CSS grid. And here we go. So grid, layout, level 1. They're always coming out with new specs, right? So all the solid greens are where it's supported, and in the reds are it's not supported. These colors means there's somewhat support. So for Chrome, older versions of Chrome, not really supported, but look, latest and greatest, it's all good. Right? Firefox, latest and greatest. Edge, latest and greatest, right? IE, people don't even want to write for IE anymore, people just sometimes like, we're not writing for Internet Explorer. It's such a pain in the ass supporting Microsoft sometimes. I don't know who's using, anybody using Opera? Right, it's one of those, does anybody heard that? Right, I don't know, a BlackBerry browser, I don't know. No one's like, I'm going to support BlackBerry browser or Opera mobile. Like, I mean, they support it. But this is where you would go to get the level of support. And we could have done the same thing with Flexbox. Flexbox, there's much more support. Flexbox. Flexbox is much more support. I mean, this just kind of goes higher because Flexbox has been around longer than Grid. Grid hasn't been around as long. So Grid is taking off though. There's just this movement. There's a change in the way people are approaching layouts. There's a change in the way developers are approaching coding and application. Things like React have a specific way. Has anybody heard of React? React is a way of coding an application for the front end, and its structure is unique, and other applications like Vue is another one, is they're applying the same concept, okay? Grid is this new way of doing things. It's completely different than anything else you would have ever learned. If we went back in time and I was like, we're gonna do Bootstrap and we're gonna do this, it would have been different. Grid is something you really need to know. It is the new thing. Cool. Any other questions? All right. So we did that one. Your job now is to do the 3-column layout. Okay? You build out the HTML any which way you want to do it. If you want to use nested grids, use nested grids. We didn't do it, but from Flexbox you can use nested Flexbox, which means grid you can use nested grid. Okay? Examine how you created your flex box and maybe like make some adjustments and create this 3-column layout. Okay? Just the 3-column layout. That's all I'm looking for. I'm going to set the timer for about 15 minutes. Yes.
My code is exactly the same as yours, but for some reason, this is what I have.
Okay. Shoot me your code.
Just
Shoot me a link. I'll pull it up here.
I'll just send you a direct message.
Yeah. Oh, I think you might have sent it to the wrong one.
How many joke you hang out there?
I think there's 2.
Oh man.
I think, let me see. I'm this one with the green. Oh, am I? Which one did you send it to?
I don't know. I think
Okay.
the first one.
All right, so send it to the second one.
Oh man.
Okay. No, you might have sent it.
Why are things going so wrong?
I don't know.
Can you send me a direct
Sure,
message? There's
All
only one beyond, I assure you.
Okay.
B-I. Yeah, that's the first
This
one.
one.
Oh, a third.
Oh, is there 3? There's-
Yes.
Oh, snap. Okay. No wonder when people might send me something, I'm like, all right, so let's do this. Let me just open it up. So I'm gonna go here and let's take a look and see. First, I'm gonna do this. I'm just gonna make sure, analyze the HTML. Nothing really, those are just warning. I'm gonna go here and just analyze this, just to make sure maybe there's no something. It's, all right, so these are just empty blocks. Okay. Let's go to, where are we here? 3FR, 3FR, 3FR. There's our container. I think you got heights. Okay. Yeah, I found it out because I almost feel like it should have moved these things, right? So I'm just going to go in here and see. Container, header, tag.
Oh, the header doesn't have a closer. Okay.
Yeah, so that could be it. So, well, here's your closer for header. No, that's the
No,
closer.
because I forgot the.
Oh, you didn't put this. So let's add that. Maybe.
Oh man.
There you go. This is one thing. So it's not quite exactly what I had, but pretty damn close to what I had. Okay, it works. Well, at least we discovered there's 3 of me out there.
Yeah, well, my homework is to be like, I need to realize I spelled container incorrectly.
Oh, yeah, that'll throw you off every time. Oh, do you want the spacing? It's grid gap. Yeah, grid gap is for both, is the short end for both column and row. You could do grid column gap, grid row gap. Would you like that? Yeah, remember it's the container that's applying those settings. Oh. Just be on containers. So, I'm just trying to get out of the targeting the congregation. You can't put time. If there's a body for it, as you do input type, you do input type, if you're targeting input type, you can give it anything. Let's just say if you give it a number, like if you put a number in there, like 2, if we target the second one, let me take a look at it. I just off the top of my head, I don't know if it's maybe we could put a wild card there, like wild card symbol. Let me see. So people hate me when I redo this. Oh, right here. Right. See the wild card? That's. No, I mean I had a border on the container itself. So if I remove it on the container, then it's just the element. So this wild card. Yeah. So container space and the wild card target everything underneath. Yeah, if you get done with the second one, hit the third one. Don't stop. Don't stop. Just gonna go get it. Take a battery thing. Is it a battery or it's just?
Oh, I mean, it's a bad.
Oh, okay.
It still lasts 30 seconds.
All right. Figured you'd be a lot sadder if it just died. I was like, what the? That's the nightmare. Not working. Cool. Right. Okay. A couple of solutions. Search bar. Let me take a look. I will take a look at. That's down. Send me his solution. So, take a look at the 3-column layout, right? Take a look at what it looks like in here. 3-column layout, header, footer, and side, main, and side, right? I think everyone's going to kind of like almost default to this now, just a straight structure. We should structure it a little bit differently down the line so that the content that belongs to the other content should be packaged together. Otherwise, you're going to have just a web page full of just things, and you're like, what thing belongs to what, right? So that's just the structure. That's the structure, easy enough, right? Let's go to the 2-column layout, 3-column layout, right? 3-column layout, right? Not a lot that we need to do. Give it a height, and we use a height. And we have grid. That's yes. Oh, that's okay. There we go. 3-column layout 2. There we go. All right. Display grid, turn it on. Template columns. So you got 3 columns. 1, 2, and 3. It's clear that this is bigger than the other 2. So these represent this and this. 4 FR represents that, right? I'm just curious if you changed it from 1 FR. What if I did 1 FR and this was like 2? This was 1 FR with that. Would give us similar something, right? So just know that the fractional units is the free space. I'm going to take up twice as much free space as the others, and then they're going to divide it, and they're dividing it equal. So you don't have to do this 2, 4 thing, just using simple numbers like this, right? The rows, 1, 2, and 3, right? You're doing the point. We did 150 pixels before using fractional units. That's fine too, right? Once again, this could be, I'm going to probably say, could it be, you know, we'd have to do something like 2 FR or 3 FR. So I think maybe here you do need the 4 FR to get that space, right? Okay, so the header, since it's the first thing in the HTML anyway, so it's grid column, we want to go from the first to the last, line 1 to line 4. Easy enough. We don't have to give it a row. It just kind of defaults into that row, right? The footer, same thing, right? Footer's easy enough. Column 1 to 4, and it just goes there. And you didn't have to do anything with the middle stuff, right? It just knew where to put it. One of those things. You didn't have to structure it. You just told it here what you wanted the rows to be, and it kind of put it where it wanted to put it, right? So easy enough. Once again, if you wanted to force it in there and make sure it was always in there, because when we get to responsive and you move things around and now things need to be moved, you may want to have them there to change those settings later on. Did anyone have anything different than this? Or my assumption is if you did, it would have been assigning the elements themselves to those rows. That's my assumption. Anybody structure it differently than this? Anything wildly differently? Did anyone opt to like put a main and then put a section in the side to go the route, like the Flexbox route? No, I didn't. I did it just the way you did. It's the way it is. It looks pretty easy, right? All right. Cool. So you'll have the third one to work on. So if you want to work on it, we're not going to solve it right now. We only have a few more minutes. But the same thing. You should be able to implement it. You're on your way to kind of hanging it out, right? Header, footer, and what it looks like here. Yeah. So 2, is this, these are the columns?
Yeah, I'm going to change.
Oh, yeah. So you may need to change. Yeah, it gets a little strange now because now you have these things that seem like they're off, right? No, this isn't it. Here's the layout, right? So how many true columns? So here I might do, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. And then these will have 2, these will have 2, and I'll figure these out also because we still need to get there, right? It's an odd number, and so it's like where does these things end and where do they begin, right? So we'll cover that solution next class. Just keep working on it. I just want to go over what the homework is. So homework is just another few articles. This is like a 5-minute article on grid and flexbox. Really easy article. Once again, I really want you to understand when you use grid, when you use flexbox, do not try to force your project to just be grid, not using flexbox, because you should be using both, and you should walk out of the class knowing how to use both. Here's just a simple article on using grid now in the browser and like kind of why you should learn it, talking about grid history, just so you can get a better understanding of it. Like, why am I using it? And here's an article to the image gallery. This is kind of what we did. I was reading stuff, I found this, and I was like, hey, that's cool, we can build that. Like, I could have built it without reading the article, but when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's cool. And then they do it, they're using repeats. They did a lot more columns. Like, I changed it up because I knew we could have done it differently. They have 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 columns, 8 rows. We didn't need that. That to me was like excessive. So I opted to just do 4, right? And they'll walk you through it. You can see the way they're doing it, copy, paste. If you try to copy and paste this, you're gonna get like little, instead of quotes, you're gonna get like weird quotes. So you can take a look at it and read what they did. We did it, we implemented it. So you can read through the articles. Yeah, I'll put the recording later. And exit tickets, just fill out an exit ticket. Exit tickets are there. I'll Slack it out though. So there's the exit ticket. Yeah.
So when you are resizing the screen that built on grid, does the grid itself just keep proportion and shrink, or can you do like a hybrid grid?
I mean, you can mix the two together, but yeah, these layouts were pretty much fixed. Like, I'll go back to this. I set the widths of the container. I think I set the width of the container here to be the layouts themselves. Let me see. They don't grab. I think I set it to be a fixed width. So it wouldn't move. There would be no responsive. It would just stay there. So no one's getting confused by them. And I think, let me just see. I think I might have done it on the parent container. Let me see. Is it the body? Did I? Yeah. See how the body has a width? 800 pixels. So nothing else. The body's always going to be this. Even if you squeeze, the thing never goes. It's not responsive. But say we did, I don't know, 80%. Right? Let's say if I did it 80%, it is flexible. Right? So you could do it.
So then for mobile, that would mean that you have set up like percentages in order to have it form that.
So when we get to mobile, there's different approaches. Like, I wouldn't worry. Yeah.
I'll worry about it.
Yeah. I don't even think you have to worry about it either. I don't think it's something you have to worry about. Have a good one.